mouth breather. I'm recording this while the George Floyd situation is still ongoing out there. I thought about making a video about it, but I decided that I didn't really have much of anything to add. It's a big, scary mess that nobody really wanted. Nobody really knows what to do about it. The government is, of course, having the wrong reaction, which everybody who knew anything about this country could have seen coming. And I haven't left the house since this insanity began, and from what I've heard, there's been some significant damage to some important local businesses, and I'm concerned about that, but there's not really very much I can do about it. My situation is pretty dire, but not quite dire enough to make me want to join the riot in the street, especially given race issues and so forth. So I had a different inspiration that made me finally pick up my god-awful camera once again and record another video. And that was a conversation I had on social media where I had mentioned a distaste for social systems, and the person that I'm arguing with said, well, you depend on all these social systems for your existence, so you shouldn't be complaining. And my comeback to that was that I depend upon social systems because I am part of Western civilization, which means that I'm kind of stuck in a cage right now, and since I'm stuck in the cage, I take advantage of things built into the cage which make it possible for me to live in the cage and sort of reduce my desperation so that I don't try as hard to escape from the cage. But it's still not a good thing, just because I am benefiting from the situation in certain respects. That does not mean that the situation is good for me. It just means that I'm making the best of a bad situation. Anyway, so part of the argument that I came up with was saying that if I had been born and raised into a tribe of people in the Amazon or something, some sort of non-civilized society, which would still count as a society. Civilization is not the only way to live. It's just the current most popular way because it sort of has a gravitational mass that draws other matter to itself. But the jury's still out as to whether it was actually a good idea for us to go down the technological civilization path. It seems on a shallow level to have worked out well for us. You know, the human species was a few 100,000, and then civilization happened, and now the human species is in the millions. But we don't know ultimately long term whether that's actually going to work out. We might just be, a vast population increase that leads immediately to a severe die-off because we don't have the infrastructure and environment capable of supporting us. You see that with mice all the time. You can have a million mice living in the walls of your house, but 900,000 of them are going to die because there's not enough food for them. So just because you're able to increase in numbers doesn't prove that your situation is good. But anyway, so I was contemplating what a society of a hunter-gatherer, extremely primitive thing. Obviously, the me that I am now, the me that I've developed into as a result of my life, you couldn't pay me enough money to go live that way. But that's because I've grown up here. That's because I have prejudices as a result of the way I've been raised. And so, if I had grown up in that life and had always had that life, then it would be a completely different situation. And I was taking mental inventory of the things that I would probably have if I lived in that situation that I don't have now the way that I live, and it's a fairly compelling list. So let's see. A father who loved me seems likely. I did not have one of those. a mother who genuinely cares about my feelings and my welfare. I could use some help in that department as well. A social situation in which a role has been prepared for me within the tribe, and I would have been taught a skill that would always remain in demand, because in that tribal environment you don't have the ability to give people skills that are not going to be continuously in demand. You can't if you teach someone how to weave baskets, the tribe is never going to not need baskets weaved, so you're going to have a job for the rest of your life. And if that's the sort of career path that you've been specialized towards, the chances are you're going to be pretty... If you're not well suited for it, that will probably get figured out fairly early. If it doesn't, you might be screwed, because there aren't the resources to retrain you. But overall, your odds of having a productive livelihood seem like they're better in a less complicated society where there are very immediate, very urgent needs, and everybody sort of gets prioritized towards those. And so that's ultimately what I think it would be. And then beyond that, just the more close-knit social structure of the kind of tribal mentality, which seems to be sort of the default for the human species. We are kind of mentally wired to gravitate towards living in small groups and having close interconnections among all the members of the group. It very much seems as though that's kind of what we are meant to have, and I think that a lot of the issues with our psychology come from the perception that we don't have that. The fact that you are, the people who are doing the George Floyd protesting, I very much doubt that most of them think that the police department of the city that they live in are actually their people and actually embrace them as full members of the same society on any meaningful level. And I think that that's pretty definitely where the problem comes from. The fact that there are too many people under the aegis of too few supposed governmental representatives, and that leads to a great sense of isolation, that leads to a great sense of resentment, and there's all sorts of problems just simmering under the surface ready to come out. And that's what happens when people do not have a society that is built around the kind of small groups that we just inherently gravitate towards. Or at least that's a theory that I've heard, and I find it fairly compelling. I'm not pretending I have all the answers, but it seems as though this is there seems to be some pretty solid evidence that when you have those small societies, there's a great sense of community, a great sense of everyone being answerable to everyone else and having obligations to everyone else, and everybody sort of inherently pulls together in a way that we clearly do not see in our very profit-focused, decentralized civilization that we have here in the West. Everybody's kind of isolated, everybody's kind of estranged from themselves, and they don't have that sense of belonging, they don't have that sense of community. And I say they, but I'm not an exception to that. I am the product of the society that I grew up in, and that I think is kind of the problem. I think I would have been probably better off if I had lived a completely different life, but here I am. So hopefully I got my point across there, more or less.